Research Department of English, Velala College for Women, and Pachyderm Tales, it is with great anticipation we welcome all of you to the Academic Forum International Conference on Creative Writing.
All the praise falls upon the Almighty. A good deed starts with His grace and ends with His mercy. Now, I call upon Ms. Devi Shri of 2nd BSc Physics to seek the blessings of God for the success of the event.
வல்லமை உள்ளவன் நீதானையா வல்லமை உள்ளவன் நீதானையா வாழ்த்துவோர் இதயமும் தேவாலயம் ஈசன் பாலனே ஐங்கரநாதா சக்தி புதல்வனே விக்ன விநாயகா வல்லமை உள்ளவன் நீதானையா வாழ்த்துவோர் இதயமும் தேவாலயம் செய்யும் நல்வினை ஜெயமுறச் செய்வாய் தேவனே நீயே அருள்மலை பொழிவாய் வையம் வாழ்ந்திட காக்கும் தெய்வமே சத்யசீலனே சிவபாலா வல்லமை உள்ளவன் நீதானையா வாழ்த்துவோர் இதயமும் தேவாலயம்.
Thank you, Devi Shri. Creative writing. It is magic or logic, art or craft, inspiration or perspiration, gift or prize. This is an era where creativity rules. The aim of this international conference on creative writing is to enrich your minds, to stimulate your creativity, to tangle your thoughts, to unleash the writer within you. To unleash the writer within you and explore the world of stories with confidence.
Creative thoughts come from creative people, and those creative minds are among us and within us. With the presence of experts and resource persons with different backgrounds, more beneficial ideas and experiences will be shared in this conference. We look forward to the positive outcome of this event, and we hope you all will enjoy your stay in this conference with us.
With heavy pride dwelling in our hearts, we are happy to announce that this conference is a milestone through which we publish an anthology under the Pachyderm Tales on the topic Creative Female Cosmos. Now, we request our principal, Madam Dr. S.K. Jayanti, to accord a ceremonial welcome to the gathering.
Pleasant morning to all. Good morning, honored guests, eminent academicians, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the management, Velala Educational Trust, most respected President, Thiru S.S. Kandasamy, Honorable Secretary and Correspondent, Thiru S.T. Chandrasekhar, distinguished resource persons of the day, organizing committee members, Dr. L.M. Swaranlata and her team from the PG and Research Department of English, and faculty members of both teaching and non-teaching, enthusiastic participants from various colleges, and my dear students. It is a great pleasure indeed for me to make an opening address for the International Conference on Creative Writing, which is a joint initiative of PG and Research Department of English and Pachyderm Tales. I feel honored to welcome our Secretary and Correspondent, Thiru S.T. Chandrasekhar, pillar of this pioneer institution, a man working with a mission towards promoting education and especially empowering and enriching women scholars hailing from rural areas. Hearty welcome to you, sir. We would like to take this opportunity to express a hearty welcome on my behalf and on our institution's behalf to eminent resource persons, Ms. Vinita, Indian author, senior journalist, The Times of India, Dr. Abdul Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Associate Professor of English, Jamal Muhammad College, Trichy, Dr. Joyita, Postdoctoral Fellow in Cancer Biology, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, Ms. Sweta Prakash, author and CPO, Pachyderm Tales, London, Dr. Maria Preeti Srinivasan, Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, Queen Mary's College, Chennai, Mr. Isai Amudan, music composer, music and language tutor, Minstrels in Education Private Limited, and also patron, Queen Mary's College, Chennai, Ms. Divya Hariharan, author and lecturer, Bayan College, Women, and the keynote speaker, Dr. R Lakshmi Priya. We feel extremely honored to have the virtual presence of the resource persons. Really, the virtual presence of all the resource persons for this conference is a source of inspiration and a great moral booster to the entire student community during this pandemic situation. I extend my most cordial welcome to all resource persons. Dear participants, I am sure that this conference provides an invaluable opportunity to gain more knowledge. Last but not least, I welcome all those who contribute to make today's meet a grand success. Thank you all for your presence and participation. I congratulate the organizing committee, volunteers for giving such a platform to discuss on a wonderful topic, creative writing. I sincerely hope you all will enjoy today and the next 2 days of international conference. I welcome one and all present here. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am, for your warm greetings.
Now, let me welcome Madam Dr. L.M. Swarnalata, Head of the Department of English and IQAC Cell Coordinator of our college, to facilitate the gathering.
Good morning to everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to our international conference on creative writing. We are proud to have academic legends as a part of our program, and we are thrilled to have you all as we know your extraordinary abilities, explorative ideas, and great attitudes. We are pleased you decided to join us to enlighten the student community. It is an esteemed a warm welcome to those of you that have been with us for a long time now, as well as those who are new to our institution. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you and who are sincerely committed to this mega conference to make it a student-friendly and creator-friendly. The topic of our conference, creative writing, is an all-time valid one to mentor the students to sharpen their creative thinking and critical abilities. Creative thinking is the ability to consider something in a new way. It is thinking outside the box, and it involves later thinking to explore patterns that are not obvious. It means bringing a fresh and unorthodox and newer thought about perspective to our new skills. To put it briefly, it is an aha moment in intimating an innovation and in thought and in action and in exercise. Thank you.
A good start is half success. Thank you, ma'am.
The success of the event is determined by the inspiring presence of a great personality who lends a charisma to the occasion. And we are extremely privileged to extend a hearty welcome to our special guest, CEO and founder of Pachyderm Tales, Dr. R Lakshmi Priya. I request Madam Miss S. Farida Bano, Assistant Professor, PG and Research Department of English, to introduce the keynote speaker.
Good morning, one and all. I feel extremely delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. R Lakshmi Priya. Dr. R Lakshmi Priya is founder and CEO of Pachyderm Tales, a creative platform that facilitates translation, editing, compiling, cover designing, and publication. She has worked with more than 200 books in 14 languages. Her ardent love for voicing women's rights has led her to campaign for a global networking platform for women from all walks of life, cutting across spatial zones. She spearheads the campaign for recognizing and arranging award shows as a part of Women Empowerment Program. She is also passionate about translating Tamil literary works to English and vice versa, which feeds her passion for literature. She has translated Bava Chelladurai's Kadai Solli, Pangu Kariyum Pin Iravugalum into English, Shweta Prakash's How Elan Twisted Its Horns into Tamil, and at present, she has translated Haruki Murakami's Sputnik Sweetheart into Tamil for Yedar Publishing House. At present, she is working on translation of Abdul Razak Gurna along with 4 other writers. She has published an anthology of horror short stories published by Yukioto, a Canadian-based publishing house. She is a visiting professor in General Sudirman University, Indonesia, and Royal University of Bhutan. She has delivered lectures in more than 30 universities in India and abroad. She received her doctorate from Bharatdasan University on the title Decanonizing the Sleuth, an analysis of postmodern anti-detective fiction. She's working on its publication at present. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to have amidst us such an accomplished persona. She's here to give a speech on the topic Feminine Sublimity and Freefall. Now, Dr. Priya, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farida ma'am. I wholeheartedly thank Vellalar College for this opportunity to collaborate and work on the conference once again. The journey of Pachyderm Tales with Vellalar College have been going and growing strong for about 3 years now. We at Pachyderm Tales represent book written by diverse authors. We help them mend, refashion, and restyle their books. We work on translation, editing, cover designing, and multiple other aspects in creating a book. Swarnalata ma'am and every one of the teachers in Vellalar English department have always supported and helped us in various projects. I thank them wholeheartedly. When Farida ma'am, on behalf of Vellalar College, approached me for a conference concept, the first word that came in my mind was female cosmos. That is how I have always seen Vellalar, a sort of a female utopia where every one of them work towards a collective good. And that is how female cosmos and creative writing became the topic of conversation and aided us in creating literature around it, which we will be publishing very soon. The exchange for forthcoming 3 days is going to be around speakers, their ideology of women, and their representation in literary cosmos. With my experience in working with feminist books and women authors, I'm going to share the approach that is unique to reading, writing, and understanding women cosmos. Let's do a quick Googling on the most powerful women in literature according to survey. I know this is not an interactive session, but I want you to think of the women who come in your mind, the women author who come in your mind. Put it aside for a minute, and then the women character that literature has created, most powerful women character in literature. Now that you have thought of it, it might have been Jane Eyre, it might have been Annie from Green Gables, it might have been one of the characters in Little Women, Jo from Famous Five, Matilda by Roald Dahl. It can be one of the numerous women that who accompanies Bond. It can be somebody like Wonder Woman. It can be Harley Quinn. It can be, let's say, somebody like Black Widow. It can be Bathsheba Everdeen. Any woman who comes in your mind, or let's go to mythological women. Penelope, Medea, Medusa, Sita, anyone. Now I'm asking you a question. I want you to ask yourself, do we connect with them? I know the answer would be yes. Do we connect with every aspect of the narration? I mean, the way they are portrayed, the way they are characterized, how the storyline develops. Are we connecting with every single aspect of it? We would say maybe. if we create the same character, if you create the same character, would you change something in it? I know every one of you would say, definitely. There would be at least one aspect of that character which you would like to change. I want to quote an interesting episode. I remember asking this question to my teacher before 7 years. He was talking about this amazing book where Bathsheba features. I hope you know that it's Far from Madding Ground. And when he was talking, he said that Bathsheba is so strong, she's powerful, she makes her decision. I remember it was a class where there were so many guys, and I was one among the few girls who were sitting there, and I couldn't accept it at all. I couldn't see Bathsheba as a stronger character. I argued with them. That argument became really big. Like, we were arguing for hours together. I was saying, no, these are the reasons why I don't agree that she's a strong female character. Now, at some point in time, maybe you all must have felt it too. You must have felt that, okay, this woman is strong, but she's not strong enough for me to relate to. I also remember another incident. It was on Greek mythology. I was writing a series on Greek mythology. I was translating Greek mythological story according to my perspective in Tamil. I was doing it with Shweta Prakash, who was going to talk to you tomorrow. And during one of those conversations that I and Shweta was having, I was narrating the story of Medusa. My brother and mother happened to be at that moment in that room, and my brother became curious. He was asking, okay, tell me the story of Medusa. What is that aspect that fascinates you? I started narrating the story to my brother, and then I realized somewhere he will not be able to connect with it, because as a student of literature, as a reader of literature, you understand, okay, fine, this is how Greek mythology goes. You understand the ethos, or you understand the cosmos in which Medusa is placed, and you find out, okay, fine, she went through this because of the so-called catharsis, or it was a fatal flaw and things like that. But as a layman, nobody can relate to Medusa, because others will not see Medusa as a powerful woman at all. That got me thinking, why is there this lacunae? Now I want you to think about it. Who are actually powerful? Esther Greenwood from Belgium, the unnamed woman in Yellow Wallpaper, all the creations of Virginia Woolf, because they fight for real life. They struggle, depression, suicidal thoughts. But how do we qualify them? We just delegate them. We just, push them to the side, to the margins, and call them conventional confession writers. Okay, why should you, think of it this way. Why should Wonder Woman have tragic love story? Why should Black Widow be portrayed the way she is? Why should she be embodiment of sadness? Why there should be so much of sadness in her life? Why coming out experiences by a writer like Jonathan Winterson or Carol and Duffy should be considered feminist literature? Why, if a woman talks about her struggle, it is called feminist literature and not literature itself? I want you to ask this question. When a woman finds it difficult to explore her sexuality, when she's having writer's block, when her husband or lover passes away, she's struggling to find a foothold, when she's having weight loss, financial issues, emotional outbreaks, what do we call it? We just call it feminist literature. We do not call it literature at all. Well, for that understanding, the so-called meta-narrative literature, by its meta-narrators, these problem zones, for example, if she is exploring sexuality, like in, let's say, Sex and the City, or if she is having a creator's blog, or let's take an example like P.S. I Love You. Let's go for Bridget Jones' Diary. We call it merely as chick lit. Why is then the usual literature that we are prescribed to read, which decides our thinking, the formation of thoughts, the narration, be relegated to be called literature, not something like masculine literature or masculinist literature? Why are we calling the things that we couldn't relate to as literature? Well, these thoughts are questioned, argued, hence the birth of a creature feminine. And you may ask, why am I talking about this in 21st century? How is this relevant in any way? Because when my writers write literature, I can only talk from my experience as a literary agent. I come across numerous writers. Most of them are women. I prefer working with women writers. So because when my writers write literature, they do not write for women to read. They write for the world to read it. It may deal with women. The protagonist can be a woman. It can be a cosmos that is difficult for men's sensibility or the so-called society to understand it. You never heard us complaining. You never heard women complaining when Old Men in the Sea was thrusted down our throats. Did you hear us complaining? Now, when we say Sakurai from Kitchen or Kambili from Purple Hibiscus as the literature, and not just feminist literature, I want every one of them to understand it. I want my writers to have that podium. I want them to be considered as writers of literature, not writers of feminist literature. I'm going to quote two of those people, the people, because I have to connect to my title. One is Longinus. Longinus, when he's describing sublimity, he says that in literature, sublimity is something that echoes the greatness of spirit, something from which you can derive immense amount of pleasure. If I have to take, Barthian term and explain this, I would call it jouissance. You read something and then something awakens inside you, a passion, a fire awakens inside you. And if you reject writers of women as literary writers and relegate them only to feminist writers or chick lit writers, then what you lack is sublimity. For that lack in sublimity, I am proposing a counter proposal today. I'm going to call it female sublimity or feminine sublimity. This conference, according to me, is the first step towards feminine sublimity and understanding its free fall. This free fall comes out of Derridian understanding of aphoria. Yes, I am preaching for readers to understand that they are falling into an abyss when reading a work of fiction written by a woman. But embrace that. And in that acceptance, you get the jouissance of feminine sublimity. While the rest of the session is going to address the female cosmos, its creation, the definition with literature, and creative writing of it at its core element, as participants of this conference, Vellalar College and Pachyderm Tales request you not merely to attend the conference, give us a feedback and leave, but to create literature with us, alongside us, beside us. We are here to help you publish the same. I thank you once again, the Department of English, for collaborating with us. I wish there is a huge takeaway for the participants in end of these 3 days session. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. It is time to hail guest of honor for the day. And so we request Madam Dr. K. Kokila, Assistant Professor, PG and Research Department of English, to introduce our most venerated resource person of the session, an award-winning Indian writer, Madam Miss Vinita. Please, ma'am.
A very good morning to all. I'm Dr. Kokila, Assistant Professor of English. On behalf of the PG and Research Department of English, I'm extremely happy to introduce the resource person of today's forenoon session, Ms. Vinita, Indian author and senior journalist, The Times of India, who has a remarkable and truly outstanding profile. She is an editor and author with 20 years of experience in editing and writing. She has worked with the media as a journalist for many years, eventually moving to working with the book publishing industry. In media space, Ms. Vinita has experience in the diverse spectrum publishing, print, digital content, television, and book publishing, working in senior capacity at some of India's well-known print brands from the Times of India, Midday, and Zee TV to the Week magazine, where she started her career as an editor, and with the Economic and Political Weekly, where she last worked as chief copy editor. Being an Indian author of books for children and young adults, Ms. Vinita's writing covers both fiction and creative non-fiction and dwells on various topics such as environment, body positivity, a child's need for emotional safety and hope. She has been exploring urban living spaces and its context to children through her popular column, Mumbai for Kids with Tabloid, Midday, as well as her City Mosaic series. She has written over 24 books, fiction, non-fiction, picture books for children, and her stories are part of CBSE and ICSE curriculum. Her first book for teachers, Once Upon a Story, was co-written with Dr. Swati Popat Watts on the life and teaching methodology of Gijubai Badeka. She has been writing poetry and has been featured at the Alipore Post. To spotlight her professional commitment, she is bestowed with several awards and accolades. In 2019, her book, Sarah Learns to Fly, won Best Children's Book of the Year Award of FICCI Publishing Awards. Her Sarah Learns to Fly and Katha won FICCI's Special Jury Award as Best Book of the Year 2020. Amo and the Sparrows won the Para Honor List and Leaf Literature Award 2021. In 2020, her books Lost and Found in a Mumbai Kolivada was shortlisted for a number of awards. In the leadership space, Ms. Vinita has worked with Ashoka Changemakers for the public in their culture creator drive. For this, she conceived and lead the four-pronged program of creating new content in empathy for children, infusing the publishing community with a drive to take on the challenge of investing in fresh content, talking to schools and parents and getting them to be in sync and participate in the project. She, as well as convincing libraries into a movement where empathy-driven books were curated into a separate section. The intent was to tap young children in India and create an empathy program in the belief that tomorrow's change makers will be children who can drive leadership through empathy. She was awarded the Kalinga Fellowship 2018 for her work in the space of empathy for her work with urban school children. In 2020, she won a scholarship at H. Group's Writers in Residence program that supports fully funded residencies for selected women-identified writers. Indeed, we are fortunate to have Ms. Vinita amidst us on this spectacular event. Without any further delay, I invite Ms. Vinita to share her creative expertise with this scholarly gathering. Please, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that. That was overwhelming to hear. And I think whenever people introduce me, I'm hoping the ghost of my father's around to know that, that's who I am. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say things like that, but I was told creative writing workshop. So when I first heard that, I was like 1 hour of talking about creative writing, which is a lot of talk time. And I was also, and then it was like, that's okay, I can do that. But when Dr. Lakshmi told me, talk about yourself and your journey as a writer, and you can see that my trajectory as a writer has really moved a long time. So I'm ancient. Okay, I've started my career very, very young. And I worked as a journalist. I worked in all the spectrums of media. And I wrote, and I've also been in the publishing space. So I've done a bunch of things. And when Lakshmi said, talk about yourself, I was like, oh my God, how cool is that? I'm among the caps I wear, the cap I'm wearing right now is that of a mother of 2 teenagers. I'm in a place where nobody wants to listen to me. The minute I start talking, my kids roll their eyes and say, oh mom, is this going to be a learning moment? So imagine being asked to come here and do a learning moment and talk about myself. This is really cool. Okay, so I have come really unprepared. And yet I have prepared something, because in a journey of writing, and you will see this, I've had no learning at all, no institutional learning in the space that I am in, and 2, I've stumbled a lot. When I look at the expanse of what I've done, there is a thread and there is some method in the madness. So I'm going to share that method in that madness. I have a PPT, but that PPT, I don't know if I want to see it, because the PPT is really for me. I also believe that now there are rules are important. And one of the rules of writing is that you start knowing where you want to go and knowing that journey. And very often when you're writing, and I'm sure there are writers over here and readers over here, you will know that when you're writing, things come alive and characters come alive and the story moves on its own. It's so wonderful that you're just one of the mediums in that story. You're just there witnessing that story. It happens very often. And so putting that chart there is very important, because once in a while you'll want to go back to see if this is the journey you want to stay with or continue with that journey. So going back off and on will happen while you're writing. And I have a PPT, which is just points that seem random, but they are there for me as reference points to this conversation, which I'm going to have. I wanted to have some structure, but it's really the story of my life. So I can share the PPT, but don't worry about it. You don't have to look at it at all. Or I don't need to share the PPT because it's open right in front of me right now. So that's the pleasure of technology, where you can see and nobody can see what you're seeing. So let me know if you want. Shall I share? Do I have sharing rights, Dr. Lakshmi?
Yes, ma'am. I think you can share your PPT.
It says disabled.
Oh, just ma'am, just wait a second, ma'am. I'll just see to it.
Sure. So I'm going to tell you a bunch of things, but they're really the things that were our moments for me. And I'm sure that a lot of this is already something you already know, because, but I'm going to tell you what were our moments for me. And it's been a journey of discovery and learning. Yes, thank you so much. So I'm going to just put my PPT on, okay? It's not showing though. I'm not able to share still.
Just we're
Yeah, oh yeah,
minute,
it's come.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry for being impatient. Okay, can you all see this?
Yes, ma'am, we can see your PPT, ma'am.
Great. Okay, I'm going to do this on this. Put it here, and I've just start right here. All right. So I was told to give a title for this, and I said, okay, this is the title I want to give. I want to say I can't stop writing now, because I haven't been able to stop writing. And that I know now the stories have a purpose, but stories do have a purpose. And we've told stories all our lives for a purpose. And I think stories have been incredibly a part of human civilization, and even before language was formed, right? So we have, I'm going to do this, sorry guys. Okay, yeah. So I put this on because I want to say that we've been telling stories forever, and even before language was formed, only because we want to convey something. And even before language was formed, we drew and showed on caves that this is what we need to do to get to this point of feeding ourselves, right? So I said, I want you all now to listen to a story, okay? And I'm going to say once upon a time. And I need you all to sit and imagine the story, okay? All of us participate in imagining the story. So once upon a time, there was this woman. This was 1975, mid 1970s. So imagine that time, okay? And maybe it's a time when I was not born, but just imagine, because we have television and we have Bollywood and we know what the setting was now, okay? She was 35 years old. I want you to imagine her because she was lean, fair. She had long, waist long hair. It was tied untidily. She wore a sari untidily. She had 4 children, and the children were at the age range of, say, if the eldest was 10 years old, that's grade 5. The youngest was 2 years old. Okay. And just imagine a 10-year-old child and a 2-year-old child. So you have a 10-year-old who's still a child, who still wants to play and still is doing doll play and stuff like that. And you have a 2-year-old who's you can't keep in a cradle, right? Because that 2-year-old is going to climb up and fall down, and it's exploring and it's curious and all of that. So here you have this woman, and I need you to hold on to that imagination of that woman. I need you to remember that this woman is in mid 1970s, and the setting was middle class, and I would say closer to lower middle class. If you're getting the nuances of it, small house, city, no help, a budget. So she had a budget. She had to work within a budget, and she had to. Her work was the magnificent work of a housewife, which is doing 100 things that nobody can see and 100 things that people can see, right? And there she was doing this work, and she was getting from mealtime to mealtime, managing 4 children without help, with a budget. So every day was a chore, and the chore was getting food on the table, feeding 4 people and her husband, and then moving to the next meal without help. I need you to hold that imagination of that woman, okay? And her 4 kids, all young, very small. So if mealtime was one of the things that they had to do and to get over to the chore, and how how meal times are in our homes, we would have rice and there'll be one wet curry and one dry bhaji, and they have papadam, and you'll have maybe a fish or meat at the side if it's possible. So getting 4 children to eat is a logistical nightmare. Okay, so by the time you feed one, the other one's made the mess, somebody else has moved something, things, hot things, cold things, all of that. So this woman would put 2 of the smallest, youngest ones. So if you're saying 10, then I would say, and I'm giving you real ages, 9, then I would say 4 and 2 to eat at finish one meal so she could get to the next meal. And here's this woman, so she keeps 2 of her younger ones on the table. And near the table, she keep a chair, but the 2 of the older ones would share one chair. So you may imagine that in your head. And she would sit in the chair, and there'd be a one plate, and all the food would be on that plate. And she would sit down there and imagine the heat of the rice, imagine the curries, and imagine, her dipping, making a ball of the rice, mixing the food, putting the vegetables inside it, putting that papadam and the meat, and feeding one and the other and the other. And she would do this on a daily basis because that she had to get out to that meal. And all those 4 kids would sit down there, and all those 4 kids would open their mouths and eat. And I want you to imagine the walls collapsing. And I want you to imagine no badly painted pink wall and no chair and table, because those children were sitting over there, and it never mattered what the food was, because the kids were never on the table. They were never in that room. They were always riding on the back of a dragon, always protecting some unicorn that needed to be saved, or were standing next to Ali Baba while he said Khulja Simpson. Okay, always their hearts in their mouth, not the food in their mouth. Always the heart pounding somewhere closer ears. Always, sitting on a magic carpet or traveling across the clouds. Always there with some Indian prince or princess hunting for some magic pearl that would save some king's life. So that they never knew what they ate. And they were really happy because in that room, in that meal to meal, those children clustered in there. And that's one of the children is me, okay? And that's my mother. And that story is the story of my life, when I talk to people about storytelling and my journey, I always start with the story because my mother is a storyteller. And my mother uh, absolutely brought magic into our homes, our very middle class homes in a very crowded city like Mumbai, where I belonged to and I was born. And the way she told a story is the way I tell stories, right? And just because she needed to have us engaged, she would sit down there and she mined every book for children through her mouth. So when you talk of the 1001 Nights of Arabian Nights, that's my mother. That's the princess who needed to save her life with all of us because she had to navigate the next meal and she would get us there. So interested in it. For my mom, everything is a story. So when I tell people my mother's a storyteller, they have this vision of this person going village to village telling stories. And storytellers in India and all over the world before the newspapers came into force were the ways that information passed from village to village, right? From kingdom to kingdom, where there was no way. So the storyteller came with a fair, and the storyteller stood there and exchanged information and told the stories that happened, that what is happening, 3 mountains away, or across that river there was something happening. That was the storyteller who did that. And they were very important people because the whole village came and the village celebrated because their story would then go to the next village. So when I tell people that my mother's a storyteller, very often that's the image that all of us come into our head. But my mother was a housewife, but when she talked, this is how she talked. And we grew up with her making stories out of everything. So she'd come back from buying vegetables in the market and she'd say, "You've no idea what happened." And we'd all gather around her because she would tell us, and we'd say, like, tell us what. And she'd say, "No, wait." And she would say, "I went today, it was so hot," and we'd be right there in the marketplace with her, feeling the heat, feeling the sweat that was sticking to her blouse. And knowing exactly the vendor she was talking about, because we all had visuals in our head, right? That's what we do with imagination. That we know that the vendor was this middle-aged man with a mustache, and he had white cotton mulcher that was really clean. He wore a particular beaded mala on him because that beaded mala was not tulsi, but it was something else. So she held us like this. And that was, today I know it's called setting. It's called setting, right? So she set the thing for us, she told us the heat, she told us what she wore, she told us what he wore. And when in stories, when we put a setting, when we tell the start of a story, you are holding the audience to know where this is happening. You're also telling the audience something else. And that's what great storytelling is about. We're telling the audience that this is where we want to begin the story, but please know that the story is going to change. And that's what my mom set us to do, right? And this is wordless. She did this wordlessly. We never had processes put into place. We never had vocabulary. We just knew that we were holding on to this thing of the wonder of her in the market. And she would then bring up the middle of the story, which was a challenge, right? Something would happen. And we'd be waiting, like, what happened? Gripping us over there sensorially because she told her stories like that. And then she would close the story. And she did this over and over and over again. And I know that this is how you tell stories. I knew it from the time I was born because this is how she told everything. When my mother finished telling us Aesop's tale, Grimm's brother, all the Russian folk tales, Indian mythology, everything, and we were still hungry for stories, right? She would then start telling us stories about her life. So I know, so I've been writing stories of Kerala. And if you ask me, so today I'm also curating a book called People Call Kochi. And when they approached me to do the curation of the book, they had no clue. I don't know a word of Malayalam. I don't know anything about Kerala, definitely not about Kochi. But my writing is so Kerala. And my writing is about Kerala because my mother took me there. I felt the sand on her toes because she walked like that and she spoke like that. So I know what good storytelling is because of my mother. And storytelling is all of this, right? And I'm going to just move to the So I put all these images here. I said, once upon a time. I hope you know that storytelling is such an amazing craft. And storytelling is, when I say once upon a time, almost every one of you all just had oxytocin released in your brain. Because when we're set to listen to stories, we're also matching up to the time when we first started telling stories, hearing stories, when we were children, and they were happy spaces. When Lakshmi asked me, why did you write stories and the journey? Honestly, for me, stories have been my sanctuary, my area where I escaped. I use stories to move into places of change, of happiness, of having a controlled space, of traveling, of feeling safe. Because children's stories, from the time when I was reading stories, were stories where they had happy endings. We're exploring now in the space of children's literature, we're exploring, also telling differently other stories, necessarily with a closure, but not necessarily and they lived happily ever after. Not necessarily there. Today we're doing that. But when at my time, this was the place I escaped to. And I still need stories as my comfort space, as my safe space, as my sanctuary. I'm going to go to the next slide, if it moves at all. Okay. And so I use this quote of Proust because this is, for me, an aha moment in my life. The fact that always one story, 100,000 stories. The story has life with every reader very differently. When I asked you to imagine my mother, and all of y'all 34 participants listening here, if you were engaging in what I said, you did imagine a woman, 35-year-old with long hair, lean. You did imagine things. And I promise you that the pink wall in my head and the pink wall in your head may not be the same shade. Because we all journey with stories with our own personal experiences of pink or red or mother or wall or city. So this is my aha moment, that it's never one story. It's always, even in a room with the same bunch of people, more or less coming from similar backgrounds, listening to a story at the same time, the same words, the responses in everyone's head is different. So I used to do this experiment with a book of mine called Viksha. And Viksha is a story of trees. And I would do imagination building exercises with children without visuals. So when I tell stories, I never use a PPT, never use pictures, never use props, because I'm thinking the richness of each child's imagination. That's where the starting point is, right? Of storytelling. Just allowing the child to navigate the space the way my mother allowed us to navigate. We all must have had different dragons we were riding when we were riding a dragon. So I use this to remind myself again that to make stories as sensorial as possible. It is when you make a story sensorial, you make the reader a participant in the story. When you say the cake was delicious, that's a single sentence. But when you say she opened the door and the smell of baking came up to her, and on the table was this glistening brown, soft, steaming piece of cake. And she cut it and she put it in her mouth and it melted. And the whole mouth was flooded with chocolate. That is also delicious. And when I'm doing this, what I'm doing as a writer is allowing you to be part of my journey. I'm writing journey is knowing that there are two people in this journey, always minimum, or 100,000 people, or as many people who read it. Letting them be part of a story is a part of good storytelling. And I have learned this through different ways. I always had the rich legacy of my mother, who told us stories in a very sensorial way, but without knowing the words of it. This is how we knew. You start in a particular way, you move in a particular way, and you go in a particular way. I also use this quote because this is my life. I've been a storyteller from childhood. So I used to be the person who, when the teachers went for a staff meeting and they wanted silence in that assembly hall, they'd call Vinita and Vinita, please tell them a story. And I would make up a story right there, right there. It would be a version of many stories, and I put them, and I'd work with people's faces, right? I'd see the children, if their mouth was open or they were sitting still, I'd stay with that moment. And I'd get, everyone, the whole, like, we came from school where there were 60 children per class and 4 divisions. So imagine 100 and I'm very bad in maths. Almost to 150 children in a hall in pin drop silence because I stood there and told a story. So I've been telling stories all my life, right? But middle class, South Indian, imagine telling your parents that this is what you want to do. Imagine even dreaming of wanting to do this all your life. So obviously, this is not anything you need to do. This is not what you need to learn. You need to be a doctor. You need to be a doctor. That's it. This is non-negotiable. I used to draw. I just love drawing. And so it was like, no way. So being shouted and beaten for doing the things that I really enjoyed was part of my life. And it's like, who needs to learn these things, right? So never learned it, stumbled away, hated lots of things, and went on to do qualified graduation, post-graduation. But I keep telling, the media professionals or the students or the teachers who come and do workshops that, we feel that I give you 4 pieces of wood and I give you nail, and that doesn't mean you can make a chair. It just doesn't mean that, right? So writing stories is about crafting it. And crafting stories isn't about just nail and chairs and putting it together. It's also finding out who's sitting on the chair, what is the person's weight. So your target audience, who are you writing for? Who are you making a chair for? It's also that. It's also knowing that today this chair doesn't work. We need some other kind of chair because times change and audiences change. So knowing all of that. So when when I do workshops, I tell my participants that please learn tools. I never learned tools. I learned tools on my way, by the way. But please learn tools because empower yourself to know what you're doing and to keep evolving because your audience is changing. And all of you guys who are sitting here and listening to this today, it's terrible. It's a terrible place to write today. And I keep asking everyone, why do you think it's a terrible place to write today? And it's not because it's a scary, fierce place and also that many people are writing. It's not even about the fact that publishing is becoming challenging and it's hard to be, to get seen and heard. It's not even about that. It is about the fact that stories have become easier to access. There is powerful storytelling happening at the tip of my finger on Netflix. I don't need to read. So your audience, if they are going to read, have to be engaged from the first word go. So no reading has been for me at least knowing that I have very little time to catch them and to hold them and to still do that and to do that again and again and again. So I have 2 sets of people. One is my audience and one is the publisher who I need to get, who would want me also. So working with these 2 are one of the things that I have learned to do, to keep changing. And some of my stories, the prize-winning books, have very sad, pathetic stories. It's not these stories that have been like, wow, I want to move somebody because I wanted to tell this story. It's actually been a simple story that I made complicated because I needed to get the attention of my publisher. So the book that I've recently got an award, it's a book called Amu and the Sparrows. And I feel it's my secret, okay? You know a secret right now. I'm telling you a secret. I wrote Amu and the Sparrows as a sparrow book. It's won couple of really big awards. One is the Parag Honor List, which is a really nice place to be in because they keep books for posterity. They choose books of the year that are like really made a difference in children's lives, they feel, and that book made into that list. And of course, the Neve Literature Award, which is a nice place to be for the literature community, the author community. So it got these 2 awards. And for me, bigger than that is the fact that Amu and the Sparrows is being used by therapists in the space of healing children. For me, that's such a big thing, And the real story behind Amu and the Sparrows, and I'm going to tell you this as a secret. I've not told this to anybody. I started Amu and the Sparrows because I have written, every book of mine has a protagonist who's a name of some of my nieces and nephews. Every book has one niece and they feel very happy. And I wrote story. My first story was written for my niece, Aarti, in Canada. And I wrote it I wanted to feed her and she needed a story. So I made a story, and among the stories I told her, one story stuck, and she'd ask me, tell me this story, Vinny auntie. And I would tell her that story over and over again until I knew the story is really good and it needs to be on paper. So I put it on paper, and strangely it got published. And this is a story which is there in SSC textbooks today, Malika and the Cobra. And I wrote that story, and I got my first 500 rupees, which is a big amount of money for me. Okay, so I started with that story, and therefore, when I wrote stories, I always put one of my children. I think all my sister's children are my children, so I put that. So my kids told me, like, everyone has a story. Well, what about my story? So I wrote a book for Amu. My son is Amol, and I wrote a story for Amu. And Amu was born in March 20th, and I thought March 20th is World Sparrow Day. So he believes that sparrows are special for him. So I wrote a story of a boy and his grandmother feeding sparrows. I had written by then already around 20 books that are published. I have written more than 100 stories that are published in different languages. I don't even know where they are because they're being used by UNICEF in their rural education program in their curriculum. So I have done all of that. And I reached a point where I thought I want to do stories for the beauty of the stories, for the visual beauty of the stories. And Amu was just that story. And here I am, published author with an award already. I'd already won the FICCI award for the best book of the year with another book, Sarah, which is another story. And I still don't get a publisher wanting to publish Amu and the Sparrows. And then I sent it over and over again, and it comes back. And that's the journey of all creative people in creative spaces. It's just, navigating the space of the fact that there is demand and supply, and that's nothing to do with your work. And I just realized that it's going to get no takers. Everyone said, oh, sparrow population has changed. Oh, what is it? We love the story. It's very pretty. It reminded us of our childhood, but we can't take it. So that's what they said. And I thought to myself, what is it that I need to change in this book for it to get the birth it requires? Because I wanted to do this book. By then it became a thing in my head. And when we create, we always pull in things from our lives, right? And the fact that I knew what it felt for a child to be wordlessly grieving over something. And the fact that a little bit of my childhood has been about not able to express and put sadness into words was something I knew. So I used cleverly the fact that we're telling different stories. Indian publishing is moved. We want to do what America has been doing for the last 15 years. We want to do it today. America has been talking about divorce stories 15 years ago. We are talking about it today, right? And I used that knowledge to tweak the story, to use the metaphor of waiting and grief in a story that Amu and the Sparrows became. I sent it and it got caught. And that is the story, the true story of Amu and the Sparrows. Unfortunately, it did not start with that. It started somewhere else. But because what I want to say here today is that evolving a story is a part of the journey. Knowing what your target audience needs to hear is part of the journey. Knowing what publishers are looking, because publishers are also having a very hard time because they have budgets. If I'm a big publishing house and I can do 50 books, trust me, and I come in from the children's literature space, they will have a resource of doing 10 children's books in that 50. And therefore, it's nothing to do with the power of your story. They may love it, but they only have to, that 10 stories have to be told this year, nothing more than that, or maybe even less. And knowing this today, because I straddle two spaces, I have worked as a publisher. I know how hard it is to be a publisher. I know the price of paper changes every month. I know they're working with the logistics of printer, paper, distribution, bookstores. I know that now because I work as a publisher. And I also am an author, and I also know that I want to be seen and heard. So when I write to authors, I tell them, I'm so sorry. I know you think that we've published your book and that the work is that now our work begins, but I promise you, I have 25 babies this year. I can't look after 25 babies. You have to take your book and run with it and create that market supply and demand for your book. So I'm jumping again, stories again and again. Okay, let's move to the next. Okay, so this is for me. This is not for you guys. It's saying all of this. This has been the ingredients I use to when I write stories without having the words for it. Today, when I do presentations for creative writing, I tell them this. I tell them the stories are the beginning is about the discovery, the setting, which is what I just told you all, took you all through, right? And the crisis and the struggle is what will hold your audience together. And this is what I do in my storytelling too. And the end is about the transformation of the protagonist. The only person who will change in the story is the main character. And if you understand that, you've got a crack at it. And I think one of the most classical examples of this, why a good book is a good book, is not trying to close the story, is taking the reader, making the reader a partner in the journey of that protagonist who's changing. So if I say Harry Potter, I'm asking you, please describe and think in your head who Harry Potter is. Just that invisible child who's an orphan, right? So typical, very gray, black and white. He has no parents. He's got an uncle and an aunt and things like that who don't really love him. They just putting up with the fact that they have to be caregivers of a child. They have their own child. So all of that, right? So regular people stories is what we tell in when we don't do Superman stories. And even when we're doing Superman stories today, if you see the classical films, I don't watch movies, but I went to watch it 2 years ago or 3 years ago before COVID happened, and I was like, even the Superman or the super person, I don't even know names, they show vulnerability because we know now we have to connect to vulnerability. We have to tell you that the person who's so great and he's got so many superpowers is also someone who's hurting inside, physically and emotionally. And taking you through that journey is what storytelling is about. And I've learned that, right? Creating the regular person that all of us resonate with, making that person, you understand that person is scared of dark, scared of maybe mosquitoes or cockroaches or whatever, something that you and I are like a regular person. How can this person be the person then who takes challenges someone who seems way bigger? And your antagonist is actually sometimes the protagonist itself, right? The protagonist need to eat, maybe, right? Can be the antagonist. The situation can be the antagonist. But we need an antagonist in the story. We need that challenge in the story. And making the challenge so big and so insurmountable and still making it plausible is great storytelling. Because Harry Potter actually took on Voldemort, and you believed that he could not when he started that story. And towards the end, Harry Potter had transformed, and you were part of that transformation. And he took on Voldemort, he who cannot be named, by the darkest witches in a magical place, who had all the prowesses and yet was so afraid of this power. So how can this boy deal with this who can't be named? Is the journey of good storytelling. You know, that map you create and you still make it. It's so unbelievable in the first book, and it's unbelievable even in the last book. And still, when he does it, to do it respectfully, knowing that the journey of the reader is there, doing it respectfully. So one of the things that I do when I write, and I'm sure everyone does, is respecting the reader. Never ever thinking that your 6-year-old I'm writing for is stupid. Never ever talking down to them. I always think that I'm talking to someone who's really young, but who's really intelligent, who really gets it. Children may not have words, but children absolutely have the sensory perceptions of an adult. They know, that the child knows when parents are fighting They know the tension. Even there is the mother still serving food, the faces are still smiling. The child already knows there's been a fight and the parents are really, really angry. I'm talking to that audience, that 6-year-old who absolutely knows. And I have to convince that 6-year-old that this story is not, it can be explained in their own head. So uh, I want to say reader because I think I have been a reader all my life, right? And reading is part of a writing journey. I don't know how it is for other writers, but for me, a good piece of literature, a good poem sets me off to write. It just drives me. Something in my heart wells up, and I want to put that on paper. And I must tell you that I've been a reader as fast as I could read, and my access to books have only been a very tiny library in Chembur where I lived, where my mother paid a very small sum of money because they couldn't afford it, and we all four of us were fighting to read, right? And and that library had very small section of children's books, so I devoured all of that. But I want to tell you that even though I never had words for it, I was I at some point in time I started a diary and I took down notes of things that really moved me. When somebody says something that you never found the words for it, and they say it in a particular way, it's like, oh my, that's exactly how I felt. It's so lovely. And I was a child. I never thought of myself that, oh, I want to be an author. Never, ever could I even say these words, even in the age of 25 or 30. I want to be an author was always my side hustle, always something I did, but never ever acknowledged I did. I'm never going to be a profession, right? But at the time I could write and I was moved by writing, I was taking notes down. So I don't know if it's helpful for you, but God is in the detail. So if you, the journey I have been in is looking at small stuff and feeling how it feels, looking at closely and remembering how it feels, right? And putting and always having access to that well in your head. That's your underground, that's your groundwater, which you access when you need, when there is no rainfall, then you access groundwater. And the beauty of the little things, putting it down, the detail of how a tree looks, right? The tree, when we draw tree as we've been taught in school to draw the bark brown, the mop of leaves over it, canopy of leaves over it to be green. I ask kids today, have you seen a tree? And they all say yes. And they say, have you seen a giant tree? And they say yes. See, what is the color of the bark? And they've seen it in Chota Beam. Okay, they have not really looked at a tree. And I'm thinking that being a reader is been a really powerful part of my journey. Today, when I binged watched for 2 years, I did not read at all. I can tell you that the 2 years that I did not write were also mapping with the 2 years that I did not read. Because storytelling has been. Am I out of time? Okay, I'm sorry, I can't see too much. So, it's been about reading, and it's been about being able to put that down in words and doing all of that. This again is not important, but it's also important because it's not just a tool for writing. It's also a tool for, this has been how I think I have been working with very closely in my stories. And, finding out who I'm writing for. So for very long, I wrote only for very, very young kids. For very, very middle grade school is what I wrote for. I wrote for 10 to 12-year-olds, and I was it was easy for me because I knew who I was talking to. I was always talking to a 12-year-old in my head. So the stories were easy for me to write. Picture books and writing for younger children have been very new journey for me. And I knew that I needed to stop telling very verbal stories, very verbose stories, and I had to use less words and simplify but not talk down to a child. And at the time I wanted to do that, I did not have any course. I had one child and I was on the way to have another child. And it became very hard for me to take off time to then from full-time work and a parent to do the kind of studying I want to do, to actually invest in time in writing, or a course or an institute that will teach me. So I took time off, I took a year off, and instead in India, I did an ECC course. I joined Podar School, and one of the books I wrote recently was with my head of department of that course. You know, it was amazing that I learned so much from her, and I co-wrote a book with her. But I did the ECC course only to know what is it that needs to be the vocabulary for a very young child. And the course has helped me a lot, and I think I managed to do that. So, who are you writing for? Writing for that audience is really important, and also I think also mapping for me. I've written and got published, and just all the time the world is changing. All the time, publishing is changing, and also being um, sensitive to that, to the audience and to the publisher, and to publishing needs has been one of the things that I kept in mind, and has helped me sort of get that space that I have to do that. I think I mentioned structure and mind map, and I think I never had a mind map when I wrote. I know I had nobody to tell me this, but I think it's one of the most important learning points for me in my journey of writing, knowing how I want to do my story, putting the rules over there for that. And of course the story will have life and it will move on its own. Coming back to that roadmap that I'd drawn that map. Like, this is where I want to go. This is the journey I'm taking. This is where I want to go to, from A to point Z. And this is the way I will stop. These are my stopovers. This is my sleepover. This is my time. I will look around. So in that map kind of thing, in telling a story, sometimes you'll wander, and sometimes your map may be irrelevant, because you may find a different route, and that route may be more interesting. And I'm using this metaphorically because we all take journeys up and we all travel, and sometimes you may have planned something, knowing that you need a plan, and knowing and allowing yourself to let the plan also be bigger than you is not important. And allowing you to enjoy the journey is more important. Having the map to say, okay, I'm right now here, but I think I want to still reach point Z is important. Therefore, while writing, I tell this to everyone, because I do this. I put a roadmap, I put a mind map, I put a structure in place. Whenever you write, very often publishers or a literary agency will say, send us the contents page. And the only reason they're asking is because they need to know whether you know what the story is going to be like. They'll ask you for a contents page or index page, and they'll ask you for the first 2 chapters. And the only reason they ask you for that is they want to know whether they like your kind of writing, and they want to know whether you know whether you're ending it. So yeah, I've worked in short stories and small stories. I also worked recently on a young adult book, and I've rewritten it now. But having a structure is so important. It's something that's helped me in my journey of writing. And that doesn't go for just the mapping of the story. That is what is also part of the journey of a creative person, putting in structure daily, putting in time daily for this I would say ritual of worship that you do with words, writing every day. The task of the grunt work, the sweat work of just putting in words, doing it with discipline, because it's easy to slide away and not do it. It's important. So for me, for very long, till 2016, I worked full-time jobs in senior positions, and that was a structure in my life. And the hunger to do something that was just for the joy of writing was my side hustle of writing stories. I was always creating one book per year, doing like 10 stories, but one book would come out eventually, like in the trial of thing. And all the time, working full time, being a full time mom, being a full time married person, and comes with all the things that it comes with being a married person, to a person living with a traditional patriarchal joint family system. So I lived in a patriarchal joint family system, and it came with expectations, and I was trying to conform to that. So all of this together, and I also had this thing I did, and I say opening lines because only because this is, for me, the first line of a book is the most important line. And in publishing, I've learned this, and it's so interesting that it sort of re-emphasizes what I've known. And that, if now we, as readers or as an audience, we go, we Amazon buy books, right? We go there, and Amazon is, this is artificial intelligence is mapping your life, and you pick up one book, it'll show you 4 books of the same kind, or tell you who else who bought this book is also buying books, right? We're doing all of that. But if we went to a bookstore and if we were just browsing, the way you look at a book, and you can see the books over here, there is a science to, how there is a science to how people pick up books. So we've learned this the hard way as publishers, that if you have a good relationship with the bookseller, your books will be kept at eye level, because we tend to look at eye level books. And some books are attractive because there's a way a particular font is attractive to a person. So when we, as buyers, the people have found method in this. So what colors attract you? What font attracts you? So the publisher is also doing all of this now. They've realized that it's no longer randomness and beauty is one thing, but also catching your eye, right? So why am I telling you all of this? I'm telling you this because so the book comes up, you pick a book because you like the way it looks, the spine looks, the font and the color, you pick up that book, you will look at the back of a blurb, and usually the reader opens and read the first line. So if you've done a thick, looks pretty, okay, thick, the cover looks nice, the blurb is interesting, it makes you want to read more, and I open the book, and the first page, the first line puts me off, very good chance I'll put the book back in the bag, even though all these things have been ticked. So I'm trying to say that the opening line is important. So when you start a book, please think of 3 words. Don't have to do a long line. Do something that gets your reader to think, oh, okay, I want to know more. Okay, I'm definitely putting this, shortlisting this book in my book cart. Yeah. I think I've written all of this. I've talked all of this. That's just the craft of writing. But I wanted to say show, don't tell, because I think engaging a reader with sensorially that's what show, don't tell means. It says don't tell this person was happy. Don't tell this person was angry. Show the reader anger, because I will say she walked into the room and she slammed the books down, on the table, and her mouth was a thin line. And she said in a voice that said, open your book to so-and-so page. And her hands were in fists. I have showed you that this person was angry. And when you show something to a reader, it's a partnering process. And if I'm partnered with you, then I'm invested in it, right? So a good book has a lot of telling, but it also has a lot of showing. And one of the things I have learned now, that showing work is the hardest to write. Telling is really easy. And showing work is the easiest to read, right? So when I tell you with detail about a woman sitting and opening a washing machine and removing the clothes out, if I show this to you narratively, it's very hard to write it. Opening the washing machine, the moisture still on the washing machine lid, inner lid, and the fragrance of soap, and the dampness of clothes when she touches it, and the wrinkles on it. Writing that is a lot of time, but it's called a scene now. I know these words now because I'm engaged in this space, but I never knew that. So writing a scene is so important. It's the hardest and the easiest to read, and that's such a cool thing for me to learn. Like, it's so important when you write a scene, because you are partnering the reader, you're letting the reader be a partner. So the reader then feels worried about this woman who's cleaning the washing machine and what she's thinking in, because you're looking so closely with her, you're smelling the smell of soap. When she's looking at the clothes in text, you're looking at the clothes in text. You're looking at the stripes of a child's uniform. You're looking at somebody's and the stain or something that has been born and what that stain does to you. You are moving in that journey, and that is what good writing has been about. It's such an engaging, interesting task. I've also learned this, that when you're writing, you're God, and you can, and your job as the author, as God of that thing you're creating, is to take a bunch of things and to decide what you want to do with it. It's such fun. And I play this game with children when I do this, and also I've done it with media professionals, and it's so interesting. I would ask them to choose their character, and it can be a 12-year-old boy who's in love with his teacher, or it can be a robo with a glitch, or it can be a dacoit who cannot stop, hiccuping. And I will say, I say a number of things, but the interesting part is, I will say, let's create a protagonist. So your job as a writer is only one thing, is to tell the protagonist and make the protagonist likable, relatable. I feel invested in the protagonist. I really like the dacoit who cannot stop hiccuping. He's a dacoit. He's got a sickle and he chops people's heads. But today, in my writing the story, he is my protagonist. I'm going to see him for his violence and whatever, or two-headed monster. The fact that if you've decided that this is your protagonist, your job is to tell people the textures of who that person is, and make it relatable, and make it someone they're invested in, and to see all of it and to still be compassionate. These are easy to turn into antagonists. It's so easy to make a dacoit an evil person. But imagine if you had to do this and make it a protagonist. And that's the power of writing. You can turn anything around. And one of the things I think of, and it's been our moment for me, is that this is this woman. She's standing over here. She's 75 years old. She's wearing the sari, cotton sari. It's got a border with checks. She's got this bindi. She's got salt and pepper hair. And one of them looking at her. And two women are looking at her. For one woman, that's her mother. That same woman with a bindi, with a sari, standing over there is her mother. And the other woman, that's her mother-in-law. And I promise you, the same woman will be perceived differently. And I'm not saying mother-in-laws are bad. There's no judgment here. But my point is that we are creators, and we have the power to make someone's laughter slightly screechy and nice and happier. And I like screechy laughter because I like the protagonist. Or screechy being grating because this is an antagonist. I just can't. It's driving my nerves. That is the power of writing, and that's been such a. That is what you do when you write. Make the journey with the audience and make them see it. You can turn it. You can use words. Words have power. You can say things like, glint in his eye, and glint may have negative connotation, or sparkle in his eye because it has positive connotation. It's the same thing, but it's the power of writing, and it's power of letting the reader decide whether they like or dislike the person. The mole on the cheek can be something like so beautiful, and the mole on the cheek can be so evil. It's up to you as a writer. So turning things around and having the power to create the narrative and the texture has been part of my journey. I think all of this together has been like it's been hitting across walls and finding out whether we can or cannot do something. And it's been about possibilities. And so I use this cartoon, this meme or a cartoon strip to show that sometimes we think open sesame is a word, but it may not be the right for the market that you're writing for, or the publisher you're approaching. And finding that has been this journey of it, like open sesame. I'm going to end here. I don't know if I'm running out of time. I just can't see anybody, but I'm going to get off the stop sharing. I'm going to stop share. Yeah. I'm going to see if and ask the question. Am I running out of time? Do you want to ask question? Whatever. You're unmuted, ma'am. Kokila, ma'am, you're muted.
Sorry, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. The participants can post your questions in the chat box. Otherwise, you can unmute yourself and ask the questions.
Okay. Do I have time to speak and this is the right time to stop? Is that okay? Or I can
Yes,
talk
ma'am.
forever.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes,
Great.
ma'am.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you. Dr. Lakshmi, do you want to ask me some questions? You were talking a bunch of things when we were talking earlier.
I didn't know if I could ask questions, but if I am given an opportunity, the first question that would come in my mind is, I never thought that, Ammu and Sparrow had that kind of a twist, and it's sort of a,
anticlimax.
I got goosebumps when you were telling that, but at the same time, it was anticlimactic for me because I personally thought that, okay, it's that journey, but I do connect with you in many of the aspects that you were talking about, because if you have to quote the recent book that I'm working on, Vijaya, I know, we always think about the reader and then we think, okay, maybe we have to change the narrative.
Yeah.
And so we have had these conversations before. I know that, reality is so different from how you create as a creator, yet it's the process is I think the process itself has a story in it. I think that's the beauty of creating story.
That's true. I think even Sarah Learns to Fly, I really, by the time the fatigue of writing deeper stories or meaningful stories I was done with it, and I wanted to write a really simple story of a girl and her father. It started that, and the publisher said, we can't do this. We want to write. We want the whole village to be part of it, and so it became a bigger story. It became about hoping and dreaming and possibilities, and it was great at the journey. But sometimes you have to tweak stories and make it bigger than just the simplicity and the beauty of stories. In Indian publishing, they're doing meaningful stuff. We're in the phase they want to do meaningful stuff. We don't have the budgets or the bandwidth to do just stories for the beauty of it, unfortunately. But we'll move. We're moving. It's a great space to be in.
So I didn't finish my question at all. So what I was about to tell you was, when you have so much of passion in creating a character, imagine it the other way. Like, you're talking about Sarah, like, they wanted you to create new characters. What if you're so much invested in the character and you have to kill it, or you have to take it away completely from the story? Have you had that experience? Like, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, that's part of it's part of the writing journey, where the publisher will say, we want this change, and if you want, so it's a choice you make, whether you want to go with the publisher or you feel deeply inside you that this cannot go away, and then you will move publishers, because it becomes a point of non-negotiation at some point, right? So if the publisher says that we love the story this way, but we want this character totally taken off, then your job is to think that whether it means something to you. For instance, I was doing a book on Mumbai, and we were doing stories for 10-year-olds about publicity, and we were talking of 1993, the riots.
You're right.
And I was told, please take it off. We don't want the word Hindutva in the book. It was not a character, but it was a whole huge concept which I thought was important as a child. The children need to talk about these things. And today's children, urban children, know and don't know, because we protected them. And I was told, no, it's non-negotiable, take it off. And it was, I worked very hard to convince the publisher, always knowing that the publisher also knows what reality is. So it's a respectful journey. You take a feedback, and then you try your best to convince them. And if you can't convince them, then your job is to either get out of it and find another publisher, or to stay with it, respecting the fact that they know what they're doing, and they when they take it, the publisher that baby becomes their baby, and they also want to look after the baby in a particular way. They don't want to throw the baby into the water. they want to hold the baby and let the baby grow in the market. And so you allow that. So I took off the whole thing. I was very angry and sad about it. But I also know that Bombay was in a place where Shiv Sena would have come and broken the publisher's office and it would have got no conversation. And that as authors now, because we have conversation, because of literature festivals and school engagements, we can have those conversations on a one-to-one level at large. So I took that choice and I have taken off characters and situations and vocabulary out of it. Yeah.
Have you had publishers saying that creates some controversy?
Not yet. I'm in children's publishing. Unfortunately, in this space, a very well-known illustrator and author had a lot of trouble because they did a book about Sikh Sikh Sardar community and the pagdi, and that woman comes from the Sikh community. And yet the book was so controversial. The book was published and printed and was in bookstores. It had to be pulled back because there was so much of controversy. So I know that right now, do write controversial things has not come to me so far.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am.
My pleasure.
You write to communicate to the hearts and minds of others what is burning inside you. So true to these words, Ms. Vanita has enlightened us with her domain-specific acumen. My heartfelt gratitude to the resource person for her deep insights and exponential delivery, which had thrown light on the nuances of creative writing and made us to adapt to its diverse tools and concepts with ease. You have inspired and ignited a luminous spark of creativity within the hearts of our young children, and I'm sure they have gained a rich experience which would channelize their creative potential in a fruitful way. Thank you so much, ma'am. I also extend my special thanks to the keynote speaker, Dr. Lakshmi Priya, who spoke on feminine sublimity and free fall, highlighting the significant aspects of sublime female cosmos with specific examples and underscoring how the mythological women can be connected to the contemporary times through through certain theoretical percepts and perspectives and contexts. Thank you, Dr. Lakshmi Priya. Thank you all. And let's exit the room now, and shall we meet at 2 p.m. for the afternoon session. Thank you once again.